Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first Bicep community call of 2023. We're super excited. It's been 2 months, and we have some fun updates for you all. So this is our team. It's pretty much the same, except Mohammed has just joined as a full-time engineer after being an intern for the summer, which we're super excited about. We're super happy to have you here. Mohammed, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, just I was an intern on the Bicep project working on parameters. So I joined recently in January as full-time. Yep. Excited to be here.
Happy to have you here. You'll be talking a little bit later in this call about the parameters project, and you guys will have a nice update on that. So here are our core maintainers. Again, nothing has really changed, but we're super grateful for our maintainers helping us out and helping the team out with a lot of the work we do. What's a community call for? Again, it's for you guys, not for us. So please be active in the Q&A. You can ask questions in chat because we have all of our engineers here, or you can raise your hand at the end or any of that. Yeah, this is more of a discussion for us to be able to talk to you. Like I said, use the chat. If you have questions, raise your hand and we can allow you to unmute as well. All right, on to ODOT 14 release. Alex, you want to cover this?
Yep. Hey, everyone. So we didn't do a release on January 1st, so this is kind of 2 months worth of work, but obviously we weren't super active towards the end of the year. The first one, the Kubernetes provider, all the Biceps side work is done and released. But really, this is about getting the backend fully rolled out. Optimistically, it actually looks like the backend is going to roll out successfully. It's made it decently far in the rollout. So sometime in the next few days, this should be available to everyone, and we will tweet it out and try to let everyone know when it's fully accessible. It should be any day now, hopefully. Paste as Bicep. So Steven's actually going to demo this. We're going to release this also as a preview for ODOT 14 and then make it available to everyone in ODOT 15, but you'll be able to opt in ODOT 14. This is pretty cool for especially if you're copying JSON objects around from other locations. This is really convenient. We did finally get the CDN fully rolled out. So nobody should be hitting any GitHub API limits. You shouldn't be hitting any 401 errors in DevOps or GitHub pipelines at this point. If you do, please let us know right away. But this seems to have been solved. We haven't seen any complaints with the latest versions in a while now. We are releasing a new linter rule to recommend using the parent property. So if you're used to doing child resources with basically adding segments to the name property of a resource with slashes, we can't validate that richly in a lot of different cases, and we want you to use either the parent property or nest the child inside of the parent. So now we have a linter rule to kind of identify when you're not doing that and suggest that you use the parent property. And then we fixed a bug with insert resource silently failing. So I was actually on Kevin's Streaming Clouds show this past week, and this failed in the demo silently. So I had to remember that we hadn't released this fix yet. So this should all be out hopefully in the next couple of days.
We do have a question. I'm not sure if it was fully answered about extensibility. Anthony, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Sorry, what was the question?
I think Marcin did answer. How will extensibility work when we want to create a custom provider for a custom REST API without any updates on the Microsoft side?
Yeah. So basically, pretty much what Martin said. We currently own the list of extensibility providers. So right now that's just Kubernetes. We're looking into AD in the future. Having anyone be able to write a provider is something we're looking we're thinking about in the long term, but there's no current plan to support that.
Good. Hopefully that answers your question.
But by the way, once we do have the third-party extensibility in the future, it will not require deployments from like our internal backend. It'll be something that's completely user controlled.
Okay. And on the ETA, we will touch on that at the end of the call. All right, future releases, Alex.
So for the February 1st 0.15 release, I was just skimming through what we have tagged as 0.15 and what's remaining in 0.14. I think this is going to be mostly bugs and kind of smaller quality fixes, so no major features other than I think public module registry completions. If they're not landing in 0.14, they should be landing in 0.15, I'm pretty sure. So if you are using the public registry, if you do br/public, you'll now start getting completions for everything that's available there. And we have been quietly adding some more content into the public registry, and we are really earnestly trying to get all the Carmel content into the public registry. I know a lot of you all are using that today. So we're just trying to figure out the right way to do that to make sure that that's maintainable. But we hope to continue to add more content there. Private registry completions is further out, so I listed that under O.star, and I know, Mikolai, you were asking about that as well. There's some external dependencies on kind of the root capabilities of ACR to enable that in a maintainable way. So we're kind of figuring out when those dependencies will land and when we can light up that feature. For 0.16, I hope that the CIDR math functions that a lot of you have asked about will be released. So we're kind of speccing out the design, and hopefully the implementation is not terrible and the rollout happens at a reasonable rate. So those can land sometime in March. And then the rest of the list is basically the same, although I know Mohammed's going to talk about the Bicep parameters file now that he's back. We're working on that in earnest, and hopefully we'll have that out relatively soon. And then the Microsoft Graph Provider, I think I had mentioned in past calls that there are some external dependencies there. We've started earnestly working on those. So really good progress on both the Bicep parameters file and the Graph Provider. Still for the Graph Provider, no ETAs, but we're clarifying a lot of the work that needs to be done.
Great, sounds good. We'll do a quick update on Bicep Params. Let me share my screen really quickly. I'm not sure how many people remember this from the summer, but the interns had worked on this Bicep Params file, and they had defined all of the goals, non-goals requirements, MVP, and future tasks. So this was in the summer. Some priorities have changed, especially since there were two engineers, and now we currently have one. So for our first release, we have updated some of the tasks that we're going to do. I will put this in chat so you guys can follow it a little bit more closely. It's just an understanding of what will be supported in the first release versus the second release, third release. That's how we're planning to do this for now. We have Mohammed as our main engineer working on this, and we may have some engineers on internal teams within Microsoft helping us out as well. Hopefully, that's the plan, and we'll see what happens. Yeah, Mohammed, do you want to share the ETA for this project? And if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand or put in chat. He's very willing to answer any questions. Mohammed?
Yeah, so as far as ETA goes, considering that we are working on 2 newer code bases alongside on this feature release, so AZCLI and Azure PowerShell, and also we do have some UX decisions we need to make on some of the features like environment variables. It should be sometime with the May release. So yeah, so May release should be the ETA for this.
Great. Thanks, Mohammed. If there are any questions, yeah, put them in chat. All right, let me go back to the PowerPoint really quickly. Hands on to Stephen Weatherford. Paste this bicep.
Okay. Sharing, you should be able to see my screen. Okay, so
I can't see a screen.
One second.
Still,
Try one more time.
okay, now?
Yeah, there we go.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Okay, yeah, we're releasing this under a preview for this version because we'd like to get some more bake time and some feedback on how it works, and there are reports of occasional issues, so we'd like to iron that out first. So there will be an option you need to turn on. So please do that and give it a try. And then there are actually two options. There's well, here, I start out, we've got a simple template here. I can go to Bicep and I can paste JSON as Bicep. So just as if you decompiled the whole file there. If you have this turned on, then here I just that's exactly the type of feedback I would like. Thank you.
Yeah, someone really does not like this feature.
That could have been a happy cry.
True, cry of joy. Okay, so so you can just do a regular Control V here, and it will convert it automatically. If that's not what you intended, you can press undo and go back to the JSON. So that's fairly straightforward and obvious. You can also take, say, a resource. Notice this is not a template, it's just a resource. And you can paste that as well.
Steven, can you enlarge the screen, please?
I'm sorry?
Like, can you enlarge the screen?
Sure. Okay. All right, so I just pasted a single resource. It was converted. You can also actually take multiple resources and paste them. And it's not just resources either. See, I had a clip. Well, I'll just grab this properties object here. Paste that. So hopefully this will speed up a lot of, simple copy paste scenarios where you were having to go through and remove the quotes from all the property names, change all the double quotes to single, etc. So let us know how you like it. Let us know if there are things you'd like changed in the behavior. Yeah, I don't know. Give it a try. Let me know. Any questions?
Yes, so you have to make a change before you have this. You have to make the change first on the Bicep configuration, right?
Yeah, on the settings for this release, we intend to turn it on by default for the next release. It's this one, and the decompile on paste will be on by default.
Okay, so for early access, how do we do it?
So it'll be available in this next release. I said it'll be off by default. So when the next release comes out, that should be there. Go and flip it on, and then you can play with it. If you're using main, it's already in main. Anything else?
What happens when you paste it in a multi-line string? Does it also converts or keeps the JSON?
Well, let us find out. I assume that the decompiler handles this, although to be honest, I have not tried it.
I think Mikolai is referring to a multi-line string on the bicep side. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Well, I mean, it's already bicep.
No, so if you
So-
do var foo equals 3 single quotes and then paste it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, except it's already bicep, so it's not going to do any conversions.
No, I think
It's only-
if your cursor right after you do a multi-line string and you paste it inside of that multi-line string.
Inside. Okay. Now there's an issue right now for us to not allow pasting inside of a string. That's not been fixed yet, but it will be. But again, if that wasn't what you intended, you can just press undo and it'll go back to the pure JSON. Does that answer that question?
Yep, thanks.
Sure. Okay, sounds like there are no other questions. So again, please try it out. Let me know. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. Let me go back to the PowerPoint. We have something kind of fun. Oh, Chris, you have your hand up? If you are talking, we can't hear you.
Sorry, that was a misclick.
Okay. Oh, okay. Got it. Sounds good. We have a question in chat. Is the pastes bicep a future release? Can't find the setting yet in my VS Code. I don't know if Stephen, you want to touch on that, or Alex?
Yeah, it'll be in this next release. 0.14.
Yep. And here is I don't know if that was a link actually. Okay. Sounds good. So we have something fun from Ryan Yates. Would you like to share your screen and start presenting?
Yeah, just give me a second.
Okay.
Find the right screen.
And just so everyone knows, the links you can click on the PowerPoint. It's really interesting. But I will also link his GitHub in the chat as well.
Okay, so can you see my screen okay? It should be sharing.
Yes, it might be a little small. Does anyone want it zoomed in more?
Press hold people, yes, please.
Yeah, that should be okay with just the amount that I need to go through. So this is a PowerShell module that looks at ARM templates. Now you might be thinking we're a Bicep community core, why are we looking at ARM templates? There's a good reason. This was something I started 2021 and then was put down for 18 months until December last year, where I finally managed to get the one error that was causing me a headache to be fixed before I was happy to release it. So this is basically the way that I have for the last sort of 4 or 5 years looked at ARM templates in a codified form that you can use in your engagements with clients. You can use it actually on a Bicep file that you've compiled to ARM to basically understand how complex a deployment could be. It has 2 public functions: measure ARM repository or ARM repo, and measure ARM template. And the sort of the meat of the module is in measure ARM template. As you can see in the right hand side, the actual file is only 400 odd lines of code. It's not a significant amount of code at the moment, and it will go in, it will look at your template and basically analyze how many parameters have you got, how many variables have you got in there, how many ARM language functions are you using, how many outputs you've got, how many resources you've got, and at some point in the future we'll also look at how many custom ARM functions have you got in there. Something I haven't used a lot is custom ARM functions. I tend to do pre-steps with PowerShell passed through as parameters to reduce the complexity in the template as part of the deployment pipeline, because I find that tends to be something less brittle. So the core things that it outputs is an ARM report of a JSON file.ARM template, or if it's looking at other JSON files, a JSON file.other JSON file, then it doesn't give you a lot. But to showcase what that looks like, I've got some code here that I've run against the Azure PowerShell, not the Azure PowerShell, the Azure Quick Start repository. I kicked this off this morning, and it took 5 hours to run against the 3,000 odd files that there's in the version of the repository that I've got. And you can see that, whilst that might not be so nicely sized, the maximum score it's spat out for one particular template is 13,006. Now that shows to me that that's a large template that's got far too many resources, far too many variables that are being used, far too many parameters that are being used, and complexity of those parameter types. So you would look to, from a maintainability perspective, probably split that out. But that could also be the fact that it is a template that's got nested deployments as opposed to linked deployments. Now, I'm a fan of linked deployments because that means you're splitting out into smaller segments and haven't got a massive file that you're looking at. But that's a personal preference versus, a preference that we see in other orgs and in the community. And this just goes through, and it'll get through all of the data that you need. There's quite a lot within that repository. And if we split it down a little bit, you can see here, if I can get the right zoom, Azure Deploy and Azure Deploy.parameters are the most commonly used in the Azure Quick Starts repository, because this was a design decision that was used a long time ago for things like ARM TTK and for various other testing mechanisms that the ARM team have had in the past. And if we have a look at the output from this, so this is just a couple of files here in ARM repo for the first 5 files in the full repository. It gets the full content. You can have a look at the template name, the template path, its directory, what version it is, how many parameters you've got, and a complexity score, and whether you've got a number of resources and complexity score. This one is on the blank template, so it's basically a very simple template of 10 as a score. But some of the other things that I find useful is how many lines, how many words, and how many characters. Now, we shouldn't really use that as a metric for managing and maintaining how complex a thing is. But for me, it is really good to understand how much time am I going to spend analyzing this particular one file. Is it going to be a case of 5 minutes? Is it going to be a case of 5 hours? Or is it something that's going to take 5 days to analyze and decompile into smaller segments that are maintainable? I will answer questions as we come through afterwards in the chat window. But if we go through into some of the other ones, again, this is looked at that one. This one's a bit better. 1130 is a complexity score, so we can have a look. It's got a number of resources. The complexity score there is 790 for the resources. Complexity score of 330 for the use of parameters. No complexity score for variables. So apparently there's no variables being used in this at all. It's just parameter references. And then we can see that the number of ARM functions, it drills down how many of those are being used. So we've got concat that's been used 6, we've got deployment that's been used once, we've got parameters count that has been 59. So this allows you to do, essentially, as I said, automated looking at how complex the template is without you spending that time. And a lot of this may have been replaced by some of the Bicep functionality, but also may not have. It has been built in a way so that you could take PS Bicep, another PowerShell module, that will output a hash table of a Bicep file and pass that to measure ARM template, which is not documented yet, but this is something that will be documented in the next couple of weeks as I get a bit more time. So that's something I just wanted to show. I think it's going to be useful. May not be as useful now as it could have been if I could have released it in 2021, but go and have a play with it. It's available on GitHub, it's available in the PowerShell gallery that you can download and use now. And I would appreciate any feedback going forward. So yeah, that was everything.
Thanks, Ryan.
Sure.
Does anyone have any questions for Ryan? Any comments? Otherwise, we can move on. Yeah.
There are some in the chat maybe that are worth covering.
sure.
One, Jan was asking if any of these features could ever be a part of PS Rule. I don't know, Ryan,
So
if you've thought about that at all.
So over the years, I've looked at various different modules that you can use for testing. So ARM-TTK is one that you know as well, Alex, because you've worked over on it over the years. Is one that's incredibly useful. PS Rule, for me, I've looked at it. It's a great module. It's something that looking at it was complex to get into very quickly. I can see there being benefit of it. It would be something to spend more time in. And if you're using it in your own environment, you could probably integrate PS Rule with ARM template complexity and say, what you want is a complexity score of less than, say, 1,000 for a particular template. And if it is above that, you basically go, nada, go back and look at doing this as another work item going forward. You could do the same with Pesta. You could do the same with any of your other code testing toolkits that you may be using if you built something of your own. So there's definitely modularization and complexity that you can build in with other tools in the tool chain that you are using. And some of the questions I've seen in there, one from Stan, I think, should it not be the other way? The more complex, the better your skills are. Now, that's a good question, I think. But if we look at this from a teachability perspective, teaching a new language like Bicep or ARM is something that's incredibly difficult to people who have never in the past done any computer programming. And that's something I've done a lot of in the past. And it is something that if you can make things less complex, they spend less time scratching their head going, I don't really get this. I don't really want to get this. Can I just go back to, using the portal for my deployments, which is not what we want if we want secure infrastructure and secure resources. So it's a 6 and 1 1/2 dozen of the other. It is interesting.
And then I think there's some maybe not necessarily questions, but considerations as you think about expanding this to Bicep is like Bicep, obviously with modules, will condense everything down to nested deployments. And so how should the scoring account for that sort of thing?
So yeah, I don't know if you've seen response to your questions that you had to me, but yeah, I think one of the things with this is if we look at it, ARM as a language has its complexity score. Bicep will also have its own similar but different complexity score. And if you were then to take a Bicep transpiled ARM template and pass it through to the ARM template complexity score generator for the ARM language, you can then do a comparison of how complex is your Bicep template and how complex is the resulting ARM template that's doing the deployment, so that if you've got an issue with the deployment, that's the thing that you're actually going to potentially need to do the troubleshooting on, not your Bicep template. And that's a thing that I've spent more time doing troubleshooting of deployments that should have worked, but for issues with resource providers or just a blip in network connectivity, sometimes can be the way that stops a deployment fix going through in the first time. It's got better over the years as things have improved within the underlying infrastructure within Azure Resource Manager and how it speaks to all the different resource providers. But I remember a time where you could deploy 3 or 4 times in one day of a complex environment and you would never get the same results. You could be waiting an hour and a half extra on one item to be deployed.
Cool. And then I see Kaiwas has his hand up.
Question in the chat. I missed to put it down. Is there any way to calculate the complexity score for infrastructure which is deployed only using AZCLI or PowerShell?
So this is something I would like to, in the future, expand this particular module to both AZ PowerShell and AZ CLI, and particularly potentially Azure Terraform, because my view is, and potentially even REST APIs or other SDKs, it should be something for managing and maintaining a scoring metric for any deployment mechanism to Azure. That's a long-term goal. That's going to take a lot of work from others in the community, because I don't do AZ CLI when I can get away with it. I don't do AZ Terraform, and I moved away from AZ PowerShell because of the issues I saw with being able to modularize and make use of deployment mechanisms that you get out of the box for free with ARM and parallelization, that you don't get so easily with AZ PowerShell or AZ CLI from when I did analysis of this going back 4 years ago. So as I say, it's a long-term goal, but I wouldn't hedge your bets on me writing it.
Thank you very much for the answer.
Right, any other questions? Right, we'll move on to requested updates. Alex, so these were requested updates in the Bicep GitHub issue for this community call, for people wanting to get updates or talk about some topics.
Yeah, I will just run through top to bottom, and I can take questions as we go. So there was a lot of discussion about deployment stacks. Please take a look at that community call link if you have questions. Brian went through it back in October in pretty good detail. But I think we're all aligned on what we're trying to do. I think we're just need to get caught up on the capabilities, and it's only in private preview, so that's understandable. If you do want to join the private preview, we can onboard you pretty easily. And we just released new versions of CLI and PowerShell for stacks, as well as some other capabilities. So it's a good time to get re-involved if you had kind of looked at it and wanted to wait for it to evolve a little bit more. There was an ask about custom Bicep linting rules. I linked to an old community call where Stephen had kind of walked through the linter code base. The only way to create a custom linting rule is to submit a linting rule, just the way that we all create new ones, which we welcome if you're interested in that, but that does require some C# and .NET experience to be able to do that. The number 3, the augment the map function to include index. We just haven't talked about it.
Before you move on, can I get back to number 2 real fast?
Sure.
I guess on the linting rules, is there work being done to update kind of the visitor pattern used for that? I guess there's one linting rule I was looking at to try and do. Gosh, I forget what the rule was, but I ran into a problem of not being able to understand enough about what was otherwise happening in the deployment. It seemed like the linting rules were very specific to if you wanted to analyze that one module, but you couldn't really look outside that module. Is there any work done to expand that pattern?
Stephen, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, a few of the rules look in other modules, but mostly it's limited to the current module. But if you have scenarios where that would help, please enter them in the issues, and we'll see what we can learn from it.
Right, thanks.
Yeah, it would be good to understand the scenario where you weren't able to get the necessary information, because it should be, in theory, everything should be available through the semantic model, but maybe we've missed something.
I'll try and find the issue. Thanks.
Cool. Number 3, the map function, including index. I think we just haven't had a chance to get to this one in triage yet. From what I've read, it seems like a reasonable ask. So I'm sure we will get to it. But please, someone jump in if I'm really misunderstanding the ask here. So we'll probably get to the triaging of that this week and get you an ETA if it's going to happen soon. Number 4, custom type imports. So if you are not aware, we introduced a new experimental feature to declare custom types, which is quite awesome in my opinion, what it can do and how expressible it is. We're iterating on that, and that's why it's an opt-in experimental feature right now. One of the things that's challenging today is just how do you, if you've done the work to declare these types, how do you use them throughout your whole Bicep project? So we will have, I think, many discussions on the right way to do custom type imports, but we don't have any real concrete designs or timelines for that yet. Number 5, add wait and retry deployment options. I think this is still something that we're open to. We just haven't really prioritized it up to this point. And it somewhat intertwines with number 7, check if resource exists. So 5 is really no update, but we're not opposed to it. I'll get to 7, so let's do 6 before 7. Simplifying resource referencing, there's no update here. We know we need to do it. That's why it's listed as a 1.0 item. There's some gnarly bugs, or one in particular that we need to fix to enable this, that we're aware of so far, but it's really, really important to us. We just, there's other things going on where this has been tough to prioritize. Number 7, check if resource exists. I do think we're still philosophically opposed to it, and I know we're drawing a hard line on that, but I think we just, if there's egregious cases of resources returning too early or not idempotent or what have you, we're pretty adamant that we need to try to solve those the right way, and really beat down with support cases and us throwing issues their way. Even on some of the more difficult things, like where cost management has not had an idempotent API for a long time, they've acknowledged the problem and are saying that they're going to fix it. So that's better than it used to be. So I know this is not fun to not have this capability, number 7, but I don't foresee us changing our perspective on this in the short term. But always happy to keep talking about it. Support ACR module reference.
I guess since I at least keep running into these issues, should we just keep on updating this thread every time we have an example? Because I guess unfortunately, as support tickets, we can't file, at least I can't file tickets direct to ARM. I can only file them particular to that group. And then they always just loop in an ARM engineer and say, oh, well, maybe this is working how it should. And it never seems to really get to a point of, this needs to be addressed by y'all. So at least going the support route, I've hit a brick wall over and over.
My ask would be, when you guys hit a brick wall, bring us into it. If you think it's not being assessed properly, let's try to deal with it and see if we can get someone to work on it properly.
Right. So Alex, in that case, should it be an issue in the GitHub with a reference to the service ticket?
Yeah, I think the service ticket is the best because they have to respond to you, even if it's a crummy response.
Oh no, it's most often crummy.
Yeah.
More likely than not.
Yeah, but at least it's on the record that the incident has been acknowledged, and there's a paper trail and a process that we started that we can work with. The issue is easy to ignore, is the problem. I like the issue because I like to keep track of it, and so in an ideal world, we have an issue and a reference to the support ticket, just like you said, Chris. But the support ticket is the crucial one. And I've done it a few times. People have brought me into support tickets, and we've said, this is not you're misinterpreting this issue. It's this team. Let's all talk about it together. And even if at that point they say, okay, it's our issue, but we don't have time to fix it right now, that is progress. Because then every time a new support ticket comes in, it'll get handled the right way, presumably. So it's the slowest way to do it, but it's the right way to do it, and it's the most maintainable way to do it. Maybe we add number 5 before we add number 7 to deal with some of this. But that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, there's just so many resources that build out, and the deploy process says they're complete, and they're in a state that's not ready for the next step.
Yeah,
I mean that our back is particularly guilty. of
storage
it says
accounts
it's
and
done.
containers.
Oh yeah, where they say that it's done, and either it hasn't propagated. So depending on how immediately you ask for it, it fails or not, or it says it's done and it immediately it's in a completed state, and then it puts itself in a maintenance state just in time for the next module, just across the board.
Yeah, I mean, those are if that's happening, it's really bad. Like if a RP is reporting done when it's not done, yes, clearly that will have problems in ARM templates and Bicep, but that will have problems all over the place.
And it
And so
does.
and so that really should be fixed in the right side. Us patching over it or allowing you to get around it is going to make pain for somebody else somewhere else.
Oh no, absolutely. But we have real world problems that we're trying to solve. And we can't necessarily wait for the support ticket going to the ARM deployment team, who's then tickling the resource provider to say, fix this thing. I mean, that's a 3-month process.
Yeah,
Really? You've gotten it resolved in only 3 months? That's great.
Let
He's
Let's
certainly not
maybe-
the only one that's felt this. It's a common thing that I know in past talks with Alex and others. I have a lot of sympathy because it's a problem getting teams to realize the amount of problem that it causes if there aren't a number of tickets getting raised that you can map together. So as painful as it is, the more tickets that can be raised, even if it does take 3 months to get that thing fixed the right way, it's at least a start to getting it fixed in the right way for the future. Even if we then have to do something in the background that circumvents the need that we had for that particular component because we've replaced it with something else.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I empathize with the pain for sure. I empathize with the pain of not being able to really solve it. I empathize certainly with the pain of dealing with support. I know that can be really challenging. I think one is there's a deployment script to do waits, and there could be deployment scripts to do retries as a really uncomfortable workaround, but a workaround. And we can revisit prioritizing wait and retry because I think that's a little more something that we're okay with. 7 is going to be a really, really tough one. It's just the reality of it. We can the thing that we can try at some point when we have a really, really strong case is say, hey, things have just gotten too bad. No one is able to get the RP teams to fix this. Let's give up. And that would have to be kind of a high level leadership decision to give up. It's not really up to me or the team. So we can consider revisiting that if this doesn't improve at all going forward. But try bringing us into more support cases, I guess, would be my ask. And let's see how often we don't make progress. And if it's just unsustainable, then I'm certainly open to revisiting it.
I mean, I think part of the challenge that I'm seeing is that we have specific examples in our deployment process where a wait is required. And we've gone down the path of, creating the little PowerShell script to do the wait. So for us, it's no longer a problem because we've got our workaround, and we're never going to report to you that there's an issue that can be solved by a wait because now we have a solution for it. If you made a native wait command, every time that thing hits, you know there's something goofy in the ARM template. I think from a tracking standpoint, if you did it, if there was a resource that was a wait resource, and every time you had a template that's hitting the race, that wait resource, you now have a metric that you can go in and look at these things and say, why in the world is every time somebody's doing something, they have to do a wait right after it? And I think that that's the only way for you to do the metrics on this. Because again, we've got day jobs and we've got to get this stuff deployed. So we're going to work around it as much as possible, even if it's just redeploying the same template twice. We have that in some of our code where We redeploy to the template and it fails at some point, and then you redeploy it in the next step in the pipeline and it succeeds.
Yeah, of course.
Why don't-
Unfortunately, we've got a waiting version as well, but we've experienced that we wait, we try it, it works great. We try it again in a downstream deployment, and it hasn't propagated there. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and then you just wait even longer.
Right.
I
Exactly.
I have a suggestion. Why don't we take between now and the next community call to have some discussions about wait and retry in particular. And then let's revisit it in the next community call and have a more maybe in-depth discussion about it and talk about specific resource providers and what cases wait would solve or retry and or something else. Does that seem like a good next step?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Sure.
Cool. Number 8, supporting ACR module reference completions we talked about. So for public, we should be able to light that up soon. For other private registries, that'll take longer. And then set or skip number 9. I really think we just need to close on syntax. We've had some false start discussions on this one, so maybe we can also include this in one to try to get more reasonable progress on in the next month and see if we can close on some syntax here. But no material update, but besides that. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns about the requested updates?
I think someone wanted to ask about cross modules, and Anthony, you're willing to talk about it quickly?
About what, sir?
Cross modules.
Cross module. Do you mind reading out the comment in the chat?
I think that was about linter rules covering across modules.
Got it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
My mistake.
Yeah, that, I mean, if anyone's interested, then feel free to either raise a GitHub issue and I can share some code pointers on how to do this in linter rules. That's actually probably the best approach. So yeah, feel free to just raise an issue with a question like how do I accomplish this, and I can share some more detail.
Great, thanks, Anthony. And thanks, Alex. So on to our Q&A. Before we get to Q&A, is anyone not receiving invites after signing up for the forum? Just want to double check because there was that issue last time, but I think I might have resolved it. Okay, sounds like no issue. Then we're on to Q&A. I guess people have been asking questions, but this is the time in which you can spend the last 15 minutes asking questions. We have one from Mark. Is ACR for Bicep modules going to be made cross-tenant accessible?
Today, you can make an ACR completely public, like anonymous access, and that is one way to do it, but obviously it's public at that point. There's an open issue to enable, I think, basic auth to container registries, and that should also open it up, but we don't have any, that work is not scheduled.
There's also option to leverage Lighthouse to give a service principal or a group from a different tenant permission to pull the modules.
Have you tried out Lighthouse as a way to do that, Mikolai?
Yeah, I'm doing this on daily basis. Works like a charm.
That's great to know. Actually, we should probably document that.
It's more like a hack, but
well, that may actually be the
somewhere.
That may actually answer the question I've had. So I guess I put a support ticket number on this the agenda thread, but I've been running into another brick wall with support. I've got a Bicep deployment in ACR. I've got an Azure DevOps task that's trying to deploy a template that references what's in ACR, for a deployment. every time that runs, it gets a 401 for not authorized. It set up the service principal. It's got ACR pull. At this point, it's even got contributor access. I've got some ARM engineer, an ACR engineer, and a DevOps engineer all on this thread, and they've been stumped for a month now as to why authorization fails. Can you not authenticate into ACR to read these Bicep modules?
I don't know enough of the details to really know what's happening.
I mean, unfortunately, my engineers are stumped. So I guess is there any way that I can get someone who has a clue about how to publish something from ACR to make this work?
Yeah, I think let's test. Oh, go ahead, Marcin.
Yeah, I can't promise that I have a clue about what's going on, but it would be good if you could, if I could get added to this. The number that you pasted in, is that the
That's the support
case number?
That's right.
Okay, I can reach out to Heike and he can hopefully add me to the support case.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think, please maybe don't abuse it, but I think anyone who's running into a support ticket and just hits a brick wall, bring us in. I think we're very interested in understanding, one, the cases in which you arrive to a brick wall, and two, like what could have been augmented. Because our support pod, they're called pods for CSS, they're really good. They know more than a lot of us do in many cases. And so if it gets to them, they usually resolve it in the right way. But the issue is it doesn't always arrive at them when it should, or it doesn't go to the right RP team. So that's why we're interested in being brought into those sorts of situations.
I guess to that end, if I can give some feedback on just the support tickets, like I said, I found that it's impossible to file a ARM specific ticket because you always have to specify some resource provider. It'd be really cool if I could actually, say this seems to be related to ARM itself and not the resource provider, because otherwise, you spend a week and a half going back and forth with, the resource provider and them saying, well, I don't know if it's an ARM thing. Maybe it's definitely our thing, just to eventually get transferred to someone in ARM. So it'd be great to just have that option.
I love can you try it to another region?
Yeah. Maybe just try it again tomorrow. No.
Yeah, maybe try unplugging it and plugging it back in. I think the history on that is the issue is if you put ARM as a category, everything becomes an ARM issue. And that gets too difficult for us to handle. So that's part of why that friction is there. I'm not saying it can't be improved, but we need to come up with a method that's different than just adding ARM, because all the tickets then get routed to us incorrectly.
Yeah, no doubt.
So yeah, I don't have a great answer, but at least you can understand why that's the case. Any other questions?
I think they've been answered in chat. But does anyone want to raise their hand and talk and ask their question directly? All right, sounds good. I think that we can.
Just very
Oh, yeah.
quickly, Carlos just put in a very interesting question about it'd be nice to be able to have something like Bicep upgrade template to the latest name. Now, you could do that quite easily within Bicep as an executable, as a feature for the future. But this is something that you could do with using measure on template from the Bicep file, and then basically take the object that's there, drill into the object that you've got with that, and then update it on the API versions, and then spit out a new template that replaces the template that's just been built. So you've got that modularization of being able to do some automated rebuilding of the template if you wanted to do that in future. So I just thought I'd call that out, because that was something that I have done in the past prior to building this out. So it can be very useful.
Cool. The only other thing I wanted to call out, and I should have put a slide on the thing for it, we are going to start a Bicep annual survey to collect kind of general happiness and satisfaction numbers, as well as some specific feature questions and things of that nature. That's going to show up in VS Code for sure, and it's going to run for like 2 to 3 weeks. So if you open VS Code during that time window, you'll get a prompt to take the survey. We also are going to email if you fit a certain criteria within your subscription and the telemetry we're allowed to look at, you may also get an email prompting you to take the survey. It's the same one. You can take it twice. We would encourage you not to take it twice, but it's not the end of the world if you do. So just be on the lookout for that, and we'll share more details as that gets released too.
Right. I think we can end the call here then. Thanks everyone for coming, and we will see you all next month. Bye everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone. See you.
Thank you.